Hello everyone, MOC Photos here again. Welcome back and thank you for joining me in the second part to my video tutorial, where I will show you guys how I edit my pictures and make most of my composites using Photoshop CS6. So without further ado, here you have it. And by the way, I am working with a PC, so any shortcut keys you guys hear will be for a PC. So to start off, here I have the raw photograph I shot of my buddy's Rocket Bunny FRS. Next, if you saw my first video, you would know the steps I took to get to my next layer, which I named After Lightroom. If you haven't, I'll post a link below to show you guys the steps I made, or I took to make the picture the way it looks now. Next, I like to make a duplicate of my background layer, which in this case I'm going to use as After Lightroom. So by pressing Ctrl J, I'll duplicate my background layer. That way, if I make any mistakes, I could always go back to the original. Next, I like to clean up my picture, whether it be the car or around the car. If there's any garbage, if there's any dust on the car. But in this case, the only thing that caught my eye were the lines from the parking lot you see here. So for that, what I did was grab the clone stamp tool, and with a soft brush, hold Alt, and select an area near the stripes or the lines and brush that away. With small pieces of garbage, rocks, or any other thing, you can always use the spot healing brush tool, which also works really well around the areas. To speed the process up, I made another layer here that's called ground cleanup, which I'll click, and there you have the edit I made with the clone stamp tool. Next, I wanted to clean up the body of the car. There wasn't too much to do to it, so the only thing I really did was even out the line you see here. Now I didn't like the way the shadow and the highlight met here, so what I did was grab the pen tool and made an outline of the line, so I could later paint it in and even out the lines. If you don't know how to use the pen tool, I'll post the link below as well, because if you don't know how to use the pen tool, then you've been really missing out on a tool that really helps on making selections, especially around cars with curved areas and other uneven edges. So once you made your outline, which I made roughly here, you're going to right click, make a selection, and I always leave it feathered a pixel. Now what I did here was grab the soft brush as well, hold Alt for the eyedropper tool, select the color near the area I wanted to paint, and then just paint in the shadowy areas here, and just keep painting in until you get something even. I did the same for the highlighted area right up here, and here I have the final edit of what it looks like, something even. So this is without and this is with. Next, I wanted to add a little contrast to the car and the windows, so what I did is I grabbed the levels adjustment tool, double click here. In my midtones slider, I brought it down slightly just to kind of even things out. So this is with the levels adjustment tool added to it. And I did the same thing for the front windshield, which you can slightly see. So this is without, and once again with. Next, I found that the windows looked a little plain. So what I did was selected the windows as well with the pen tool. To speed things up again as well, I'm going to select the mask here I have. And then select something below the line here, something halfway through the window. So make a selection. And I'm going to deselect from the already selected area, subtract. I believe I did that backwards. So you're going to want to do the other side, but what I did was from where you see the line was I added a gradient to the window. So let me go ahead and just select the window here. Alright. So I grabbed the pen tool, made a selection of the window, and I added a white gradient to the window. So once I did that, that's what it's going to look like. So any areas you didn't miss, you could always add a mask to the gradient layer, which you could as well put on a layer on its own. As you can see there, what I did to give the window a little more pop. Next, I went and cleaned up the windshield, because once you change the background, you don't want anything from the past background to show through the front windows. So for that you have two methods, or I have two methods myself that I use to take the lines out. One being the clone stamp tool, of course, and paint those lines in from the background. The other way would be the same way I did it to the body, where you grab the brush tool, select a similar color, and paint that in as well. And of course you could always keep messing around with the opacity and the softness of the brush to make everything blend in nicely. So once that was done, that's what it should look like. Alright, now if you still have a tint on your picture that you don't like, I found an easy way to color correct your images. If you can't see it through your screen, sometimes once you post it online, it'll look either a little green or yellow or some type of tint or hue. So what I do there is I grab a curves adjustment tool, and this is what you're going to do. I have the shadows eyedropper tool here. Click on that, and then I'm going to move my dark slider by holding Alt and clicking at the same time. Oops, sorry. So let's see here. I believe that was a layer. So the color correction, here we are. So curves adjustment tool. So what you do is you hold Alt and move your slider. If I could get it to work here. So shadows, and hold Alt. Oh, if it was visible, okay. So now that it's visible, hold shadows. By holding Alt and sliding the slider, you can see all the shadows in the image. And what I'm going to do here is with the eyedropper tool, I'm going to select an area of the shadows here. So say I select an area here to set my shadows of the picture. Next, I'm going to do the same thing with the highlights. Hold Alt and move your slider up, and you can start to see the highlighted areas in your picture. So I'm going to select an area around the rim here, the wheel, for my highlights. Next, the midtones. For that, all you have to do is select an area on your picture or your image that's supposed to be gray. For example, the ground here, I'm going to go ahead and click. And there you can see the before and after. So there was a bit of a hue on the picture that I removed by using that levels adjustment. Next, this next step I usually save either for the end of the picture, but in this case I used right before I started swapping out the background, which is the high pass filter. The high pass filter I use to sharpen my pictures, which is normally at the end of your processing, of course, but in this case I did it now. So for that, what I did was I held Control, Shift, Alt, and E to make a duplicate layer of everything underlining it, or everything visible in your picture. Next, you're going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and with the low radius you're going to want to hit OK, because if you move the radius too high, you'll notice it starts to do this halo effect, which will later look bad, of course. So always stick to something low, just to where you can see the outline of the car. So in this case I'm going to use something in between 1 or 2. Hit OK. And now that you have this gray image, you're going to change the blending option of the picture something to something between overlay, soft light, hard light. Overlay being the softest, moving down of course will be a harder effect. So there you have vivid being the harshest, and soft light is what I normally stick to. So I'll throw that away. I have that layer already made. Once you have that layer made, by the way, what I did was I added a mask to it. I'll show you guys here. So that was without it, and that's with it. If you can't tell the difference, once you start editing your picture, you'll be able to see it yourself as soon as you zoom in. So go ahead and add a mask to that, which, if you notice, by the way, I do like to use masks because it's the non-destructive way to edit the pictures by having something seen or not seen on your picture. So with the mask, I'm going to hit Control I, or you could have also held Alt before you clicked on the mask to make it not visible. Next, with the white brush, I'm going to go ahead and paint in around the car. That way I'm only making the high pass filter visible on the car. So that is the only thing I'm actually sharpening, and not the ground as much. Next is the fun part, I believe, which is swapping out the background. So now that I have all the editing done on the car, the ground, I'm going to go ahead and swap the background. So for that, I used a picture I took in Lake Tahoe in January. So what I did is selected the whole picture itself, and by pressing Control X, I cut out the picture. So I'll close that, I don't need that anymore. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste it on here by pressing Control V. Lower the opacity. And placing the picture somewhere where you feel comfortable it would look realistic as well. So in my case, I flipped it, so transform, flip horizontal. Now always keep in mind as well the direction from which the sun is coming from your background layer and the car itself. For my car, I didn't have a source of light directly on the car, so it didn't really matter where the light source from the background was coming. So once I had the location or the place I wanted to set my background layer, I'm going to go ahead and with the pen tool again, select the area I wanted to swap out. So to speed things up again, I'm going to go ahead and show you the selection, which is there. Next, I'm going to press the mask button here, the add layer mask. Add a mask to my background layer. So there you have it. That's what it looks like with the mask. And that's what I had from before. So that was adding the background itself. And note that you can't really see through the window already, so if at a point you wanted to show somewhat of a reflection or visibility through the window, you could always do it by selecting the window and then adding a mask to the underlying layer. So that way your window, you could remove a little bit of it just to show the trees behind or whatever you have in your background. Next was the sky, which again you have to take in mind what way the sun is reflecting on your image. So there you have it. And from my point of view in this picture, it almost looked like the sun was coming from, show you guys here, from this angle over to this way. So what I did was I took a picture here in Cloverdale, California, of course, of a sunset that we had the other day. When it selected the whole picture again, cut it out, and pasted it on here. So you can see here. And to make the edges not so harsh around the area, something I like to do to my pictures is, or to the sky at least, if your sky is blown out and your foreground isn't, an easy way you could fix that is change the blending option to multiply or darken, which in this case didn't work as well, as you can see. But most of the time, if that is the case, that's what you can do, is just change the blending option. If that didn't work out so well, then all you have to do is just use a gradient tool for your sky and just blend it in from the bottom up. If I could get, okay. So there's the sky. As you can tell, I have it to darken actually. Once I have it on darken, if it didn't blend in so well, you could always grab a mask and then paint in whatever was left over from the bottom. That way it blends in a little better. Next, to make things a little more realistic, I added a flare using just a simple gradient, which I actually, to select the color for that, I used an eyedropper tool to select the highlighted area of the sky so it matches the whole scene of the picture itself. So for the gradient, all I did was use the polygonal lasso tool. Came from here and did a simple selection just like this. Then I grabbed the gradient and came out and did something simple like that. Reduce the opacity. And once you reduce the opacity, you could always come back in with a brush and soften up the edges to make it look a little more realistic. There you have it. So something soft is what I used here. I'll show you guys what that layer looks like on its own there. So you could hardly see something there, but that's what I used for the gradient. Next, I used a Photoshop add-on called Null Light Factory. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-Shift-Alt-E to make a copy of my underlining layers as well. And hit Filter, and these are my add-ons here under Red Giant Software, Null Light Factory. And here with this program you have a bunch of options of making a light flare, which I believe work out much better than the Photoshop presets. So you can mess around with the brightness, the size, and a bunch of other effects that you could yourself play around with if you have Null Light Factory. And once you have a setting you like, so say something like that, just to give the picture a little more pop. Let it load. So once I have that done with the Null Light Factory, there was the outcome of it. Next, to tie the image all in together, I added some shadow or some colors to my shadow in the foreground here. So for that, I went ahead and created a new layer, and holding Alt with the brush tool or using the eyedropper tool, select a color in your clouds, something, so it'd be something bluish in my case, and I'm going to fill the layer with that color by pressing Control Backspace. There we are. And now by changing the blending option again to lighten, what this blending option will lighten the shadows, as you can see. So any shadowed areas will be affected by that blending option. So what I did next was I lowered the opacity to something pretty low. And then I added a layer mask to only affect the car itself. So that's what the layer mask looks like when I painted it in. And that's what that looked like when I was done. So there's the purple effect. And that's with that. So you can see it ties the picture in a little better by adding some of the color to the foreground that you have in your sky to make everything a little more believable. Now that I'm almost done, I found my picture a little dark. So I brightened up the image by just using a brightness and contrast adjustment layer and just brightened up the whole image itself. As you can tell, I used the mask as well just to keep the foreground a little darker, to direct your eyes a little more towards the car. Then to draw your eyes even more towards the car, I added another levels adjustment, or curves, adjustment layer here. And what I normally do for these is I go ahead and just grab somewhere near the bottom and pull down to bring your shadows up. See if I can make it visible here. So by bringing that down, there you have it. So I brought the line down, as you can see, that's what happened to it. And I added a layer mask to it. Let me go ahead and show you guys what I did there. So once you bring that line down from the curves adjustment, you go ahead and create a layer. Press Control I to inverse it so it's not visible. And then with the gradient, I'm going to go ahead and paint some of that back in. So with the white, I'm going to drag from the top to the bottom. And you can see I darkened up the sky a little bit just around this area. So it looks like the sun is actually lighting up the sky a little more on this side. So that alone brought a little more attention towards the car. And there you have it. Once you're all done, you could go ahead and duplicate the layer again, or everything underlining it, by holding Control Shift Alt E. And there you have almost my final image. Near the end is where you can play around with the whole image itself. You could add filters to it to bring in or tie in the whole picture itself a little more, with curves or color balance, anything else you really like. Next, all I really did was brighten up the image. So once again, brightness and contrast adjustment layer. There you have it. And just to bring in a little more blues, what I did was I grabbed actually a color balance, I believe it was. Yes, a color balance adjustment layer. And brought my blues up a little more, just so it ties it in a little better. And once again, I added a layer mask to my layer to only show the blue from my color balance on the car and the foreground itself, and not on the sky or the background as much, because you could already see enough blue just from there. And there you have the final. For the looks of it, I did lighten it up a little more, but that's how I edit most of my pictures or make most of my composites. Normally I just try to edit from the ground up, because it's a little hard to blend in the shadows or any other foregrounds and backgrounds itself to the car, or to try to put a car into a completely another picture. So if you can, try to edit just the sky the way I did, or maybe just from a sidewalk up, just to simplify your editing. So that wraps up my edit video. If you have any ideas for any other videos that you think I should make, let me know or comment below, and I'll try my best to make another video again for you guys. I know I'm not the best, of course, I'm no pro, as I've already said before, but any other questions you have, please let me know. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions, and I hope you guys liked it. Thank you. Make sure you like, subscribe, and I hope to be hearing from you guys.